You had 100 reasons not to shine when you were younger. And as a kid growing up with abuse or neglect, you may not have had the support or even the permission to be extraordinary, to be gifted, to be your unique and quirky self. But to fully become yourself now, you can't let that traumatic past keep pressing you down so that you can conform and stay invisible and play small. Right now is the time when you get to decide whether you will rise up on the path of real healing and become your full and real self, or whether you're going to take that so-called easy road, which in the short run is easier. It doesn't take a lot of courage or effort, but it does require that you continue your self-suppression and tolerate the empty and depressed feeling that playing small always demands. That's the price you pay. And I'm here to tell you from my own experience, recovering from abuse and neglect in childhood, that healing is the easy road. It sounds scary and hard, but the hardest road of all is when you don't heal your past, when you don't find a way of calming those intense triggers, and you have to keep your life very tightly controlled and isolated and tiptoeing around your own reactions. Because why? Because you think that if you don't control it, life is going to break you. And I want to show you how you cannot break, how you can open up a little at a time to experiences like friendship and romantic relationships and your work life and trying new things that used to be too triggering for you. And I want to give you the real tools to make that possible for yourself, to get out of small and get into the big, beautiful life you really want. Okay? So to stop instinctively protecting yourself, let's look at what's really going on when you play small. The first thing is, if you're like just about everybody with complex PTSD, people are triggering. And when I say triggering, I'm not just talking about a cultural phenomenon. I'm talking about a physiological reaction that happens with PTSD when a certain stimulus happens. It could be something like people yelling at you, something that was terribly unfair, being in danger, suddenly a car almost runs into you, things like that. There could be positive triggers too, like asking somebody out on a date or winning a prize. Things like that can set off a brain dysregulation that actually makes it difficult for you to function normally. So sometimes with people can be so triggering, just connecting with them, that you end up keeping them at arm's length or cutting them off and removing yourself from opportunities with people just because you're afraid of how you're going to feel when you put yourself out there a little bit. That feeling that rises up that you don't trust yourself to handle when you're triggered. There's a little sequence that happens in your body, in your emotions when you're triggered. You might not even be aware that it's there, or you thought it was just you, that you're just overreacting. Maybe you tell yourself you're childish and you should get over it, and you've probably been told that by other people, but when you say it to yourself, that's a self-attack that can really make the effect of the trigger worse, just so you remember that. Now let's say you're hanging out at work and somebody says something, they praise somebody else where you should have gotten half the credit. That happens. That's a common trigger, getting overlooked. So let's just take the work example. A trigger comes up, adrenaline starts flowing. You can feel it like running down your arms. Does that ever happen to you? It's almost like you can feel it moving and you're, oh no, here it goes again. Your brain starts to dysregulate in the pattern that is normal and common for people who went through abuse and neglect when they were kids. Reasoning goes down, emotions go up. Next thing you know, an emotional statement just comes flying out of your mouth. You're completely unregulated for a moment. And whatever you blurted out causes damage to your reputation, to other people's feelings. Now, this used to happen to me, and I would be totally baffled in the moment why it was happening. I didn't know what was causing it. I thought it was just me. And I couldn't understand, why would I do something so self-sabotaging? And later I learned, but at the time it feels necessary to just say this thing. It's just pressing. It feels like it must be said, and then it comes out just too harshly. And you can see people flinch when you say it. Has that ever happened to you? And then how do you feel? Shame, remorse, hiding, fear. And there were times when I would say things, and the way I sounded when I said them just made me afraid. It made me afraid to speak up. And I learned to keep my mouth shut. I'd make small talk. When I had a strong opinion or disagreed or needed to say something to defend myself or set a boundary, I just wouldn't. And I kept my ideas to myself. I'd let things that were unfair or untrue just go and not say anything. And I didn't do things like ask for a raise or make a case to my boss to let me try new things that I wanted to learn. And all of this was because I was in the habit of fearing how intense I would get when I expressed myself, especially when the stakes were high or when there was some hurt feelings like buried in there in the reason that I was speaking up. And I now know that this silence in crucial moments is normal for people with CPTSD. If you went through abuse and neglect as a kid, it's a normal reaction when you're stressed to get a little dysregulated when you speak up courageously. And if it comes out with a bit of an edge, what you can do is learn to stay more regulated in those situations. Things come out better when you're regulated. You'll have awkward moments in life. You'll have awkward moments sometimes. And sometimes you might have to apologize for your tone of voice. But all of that is a tiny price to pay when you compare it to avoiding the problem altogether by withdrawing from your life, not going for anything, saying nothing. So that's a form of playing small. A second way you might be playing small is staying stuck in blame. And first, I just want to say the people who abused you are in fact to blame for what they did to you. It's not your fault, and it's good you're healing from any idea that you may have internalized that you deserved that. The people who hurt you, they are to blame for hurting you. There's just no question there. But right now, they can't do anything about the past. And it's rare that abusers even try. But remember, even if they admitted everything and did everything they couldn't do anything about the past. The damage has been done, and your brain has sustained that injury of abuse and neglect already. And so now it's you who needs to start healing that. Now it's you who's been suffering from the dysregulated nervous system for a lot of your life, and it's been affecting your behavior and your choices. So now it's you who can heal that and start to change how this plays out. When you believe that the problem that needs solving is in the past, you give away all your power to change the problem. And the people who hurt you, they can't change the past. You can't change the past. And that's why I encourage you to take your focus off the people who hurt you, off the past, even though they were to blame, even though that really happened, and step away from the blame game. Not because they didn't hurt you, but because you need to get that power back into yourself so you can start using all your energy for changing your life right now, for noticing where CPTSD is affecting you and figuring out a strategy for how you can work around it and still succeed at the things you're trying to do. All right. A third thing that might be a factor in you playing small is that you've grown too foggy mentally and cognitively to take action on things, even when you know the right thing to do. This is also common for people who went through abuse and neglect as kids. That brain fog is something that people so often blame themselves for. You might be attacking yourself with the idea that you're stupid, you're lazy, you can't pay attention, and all of that might not be true, even if you were diagnosed with some problem in those areas. Some clinical experts I trust say that sometimes the ADHD diagnosis, for example, is a misdiagnosis of what's really a symptom of CPTSD. Not always, but that's worth noting. You can ask a professional about that if you think it might apply to you. So when you're making a plan to improve your life, but then when you take action, that brain fog comes and settles down on you, it can feel like you're walking through honey or sand or mud, like something thick and awful that slows you down and wears you out. When you're feeling stuck like that, it can be really hard to see clearly and move forward. And sometimes just following through on a series of items on a list, it'll just feel like too much. And then you get one thing done and then whoop, off into the fog again. We all know, you know what that's like, right? It's a CPTSD thing. Now, in fact, it's a dysregulation thing. And if you think you might be struggling with dysregulation, you can take my quiz that's on the free tools page of my website. That free tools page is linked right near the top of the description section under all my videos. But luckily, there are a lot of workarounds that you can use to start improving your mental acuity. Now, one of them has to do with diet. And there are many ways that you can eat in a healthy way, but it usually involves eating lightly and not eating too much sugar and not eating too much high fast carbohydrate foods. You should try it, see if it makes a difference for you. People love to talk about what to eat, and they love to debate the best way. And so whatever way is best for you, try this. Less sugar, less fast carbs. Cut it out for a couple days and see what happens to your ability to pay attention. There are other things you can do too. I teach a technique for writing fears and resentments followed by meditation. And that is the most powerful thing that I've done to get my focus and sense of calm inside back, just bringing it back, coming back to earth. Before I had this technique, I remember telling people, I used to be really smart. And I had it when I was younger. I was really good at crossword puzzles. I got good grades in school. But the worse my CPTSD symptoms got, the more I felt like my intelligence was just like wearing down. And I asked the doctor if I could get checked for dementia once. This was when I was like 30. I'd lost my ability to do math in my head or to write complicated ideas in a way that made sense to whoever was reading my work. I was hopeless at keeping track of time or remembering what was on my calendar. And that's all really normal when your CPTSD symptoms are getting worse. But what happened is, when I got my brain back and I learned to re-regulate my brain and my emotions and my nervous system by using these techniques that I teach, it's called the daily practice, by the way. These are the twin techniques of writing and meditation. I'm always talking about them. They're always linked below the videos. But when I started using that technique within about 2 weeks, it was like I felt like I had recovered about 30 IQ points. And it was this tremendous boost in my mental ability back to how I used to be. And every day, it's my opportunity to keep honing that level of calm and alert awareness. It's in that state that I have access to my natural intelligence. I was born with it, and you were born with it too. And when your natural intelligence and awareness is suppressed, it is one of the worst consequences that childhood trauma brings on people and makes it necessary for them to play small. You can't focus, you can't think. You can't access your intelligence. You lose your confidence in that. But you can't suppress yourself forever just in case you'll be caught out for being out of it or too emotional or too angry. You need that calm awareness. You need your intelligence back. It doesn't matter if you're in your 50s or your 60s or your 70s, 80s, 90s. There's more mental acuity available to you by learning to re-regulate from a triggered state of dysregulation to a regulated state. And this is something you can learn. Finally, another reason you might be playing small is because you fear other people's disapproval. When you stop playing small, it sometimes means expressing yourself, even when it might mean expressing ideas that not everybody agrees with. Now, that was a process I had to go through in order to start Crappy Childhood Fairy back in the day, not so many years ago, just a few. And I was afraid people would say I had no right to tell other people what I was discovering about what worked and what didn't for trauma. And they do say that sometimes, they say I have no right. Well, I don't feel limited by that anymore. When I first started out, I did feel limited. I tried to be safe. I wrote a very safe and very boring blog that nobody could object to, and nobody did, mostly because nobody bothered to read it. And gradually I learned that the only thing that really engaged people or made a difference in their lives is if I was real about what it was like to have what I have, what we have. I had no idea people would have such a strong reaction to it. I told the truth. I started talking about what it was like to be me, how I felt when I was trying to talk about problems to a therapist, and what it was like when I couldn't do it, and what it was like when I had a breakthrough, what caused that to happen, what did I have to stop doing. I told the truth about my experience, which was messy and a little controversial, and I was always worried about getting canceled. But the blog led to the videos, and the videos ended up finding you, and here we are. And I stopped playing small. I still get criticism, and I get a little bit of hate mail now and then, but I don't let it stop me. The work I share here has a life of its own, and it wants to come out, and it carries me forward. When I first started out, I kind of had to push it. I had to try really hard, but Now I find it like it's just kind of like a natural thing that I create every week, and it feels a little bit like getting carried along in a river. Actually, making videos is hard. Sometimes I want to resist it, but overall, like what I'm doing here in this work, I just feel like I'm being carried. And I was made for this river, and the river was made for me. And I wake up each morning, I'm just excited to get back in that river and keep going. When you play small, you don't say anything that offends people. And when you begin to show up as your real self, becoming open about who you are and telling the truth about what you know and what you believe, you take a risk. You take a risk. What helps make that an okay risk to take is when you also cultivate a loving heart, a commitment to be kind and thoughtful about when and how you express yourself, and respect for other people and their right to disagree with you. Like when those two things come up together, you're outspoken, but you're also kind and respectful, you can get away with a lot. And growing a sensitivity to others' feelings and their dignity will gain you a lot of leeway to say how you feel. Nobody likes a bully. Nobody likes a blowhard who just spouts opinions but doesn't know what they're talking about and doesn't listen. You being kind and thoughtful and real is a powerful combination for opening other people's hearts and minds, and this is where good things tend to start cropping up in your life. If you're in an environment where nobody speaks up, your self-expression, it's going to attract attention, so get ready. There are risks, but it's not as big a risk as shutting yourself down and ceasing to express who you are. When you do express yourself, you might even make it safe for other people to express themselves. That's a good side of it. Everyone benefits when groups can trust and remain open in a robust conversation about a mixture of points of view. That's a very powerful and good phenomenon, and that is how it's meant to be. When you take your place among the people working to make the world better and kinder and more supportive for those who are still struggling, especially, you will begin to feel the unmistakable stir of happiness. That's where it comes from. Not speaking up keeps you bottled up in yourself, and this may block out trauma, but it blocks out everything good too. Being yourself makes it possible to turn your focus outward, to feel connection to other people, to stop focusing so much on whether you feel bad or good or hot or cold, and instead to have that purpose. Your real self might come running out like a little colt that hasn't found its legs yet, or it might come out like a little kid who gets really excited and then cries. It's a growth process, and when you first begin to express yourself, let it be clumsy. Your development may have been delayed in some areas, but it's catching up now. And so yes, go ahead and get started. Remember to be kind. Practice will make it all smoother. People may start relying on you, and this can be scary for a person with CPTSD. Maybe you're a people pleaser, or maybe too much responsibility was part of what hurt you when you were a kid, and you ended up with a big wall around saying yes to responsibility. And that may be a great coping strategy for a 12-year-old, but it's not for a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old. It's time to say yes to your life with boundaries, and to show up and start using your gifts. And that feeling that life is passing you by, that feeling of emptiness, that's what it feels like when there's been too much avoidance and too much self-protection and not enough standing up to bring your gifts into the world where they're desperately needed. If the idea of finding and using your gifts has grabbed your attention, I've got a video about that lined up right here. And I will see you very, very soon.